action or something. Yeah.
I'm Tori Milner, and I'm from the Iyengar Yoga Association of Greater New York here with Uday.
And I'm Susan Elena Esquivel from the Iyengar Yoga Center of Western Massachusetts.
I'm James Murphy from New York as well.
And we're so pleased to be here with Uday. And
Thank you. I thought I was going to introduce.
introduce
I'm
yourself.
Uday, and I'm happy to be with all these wonderful practitioners over here.
Yes, yeah.
You talked about when you experience in yourself that your practice starts to fizzle out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What, and I think so many people over the pandemic have gotten more in, like it's not uninterrupted anymore. It got interrupted. It's not long and uninterrupted. It's now there's been an interruption, or there's been frequent interruptions. And so then, what do you say to people who are still struggling with that, or who still are struggling with even getting back to it, or you see how, oh gosh, I used to be able to do this, but I can't even do that anymore, and so then it's easy to get dejected or something. Like, how do you fix your mind? How do you fix your mind when you see that kind of slide in the mind?
So I think I can. I would like to separate these into two things. First is not being able to do something which you used to do. So we can address that separately. That is something, as Prashantji has always said, that in his classes, that what he's doing now, ask him to do it 20 years later, 30 years later. And so that has always been the teaching there. So if we notice something which goes missing like that, and that's where the, I think, gradual change in the teaching also, where we can work on the building blocks. We may not get to the final pose or what seems like the final goal there. It's fine, but can we work on some intermediate step? Can we prepare and feel the benefit, feel the work, and notice the transition to that step at least? So that is how we've been working. The larger problem, or the thing which I've been like, I noticed me struggling with during this pandemic and all, was it's not that there was some incidents or something which doesn't leave enough time to practice. Means all said and done, there can be circumstances in life where you will have to prioritize some other things with family or whatever work, and there genuinely you would struggle to find that time. You may have, like, you may not have that hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever you're used to practice for. So those situations, fine, that all of us would have from time to time, but that is a different thing. There are times when you have the time, you can go on, and you still don't, you just can't do, or even if you start doing something, like I've noticed with myself, I'm saying I'll place the mat and then it still doesn't move, and then it starts creating that guilt.
Yeah.
I'm having the time, I'm not practicing, or I'm just trying to do something which is trying to just fool myself in a way that, okay, I've been practicing. And you can genuinely start to start noticing it. And all that starts to create a lot of struggle within, an unnecessary negativity in a way. So you start beating yourself for not doing it, so wasting the time, finding some distraction, suddenly just get into Adho Mukha and you notice something on the floor. Let me just now vacuum the floor. Let me just arrange this thing. Any and every distraction, procrastinating in a way. And I just realized that this happens. So what I've tried and what has worked to some extent is, if this kind of feel comes up, doesn't help fighting it, because the more I'm forcing, it's still creating that much more struggle within. So in that case, fine, promise 10 minutes, go for 10 minutes, thereafter it's fine. If you continue. If not, 10 minutes and that's fine. You need not just force yourself to be on the mat. And there have been times where after 10 minutes, I've just like rolled the mat and kept it aside. And there have been times when those 10 minutes have converted into 3 hours, 3.5 hours. So, but that starts to happen. And at least if I just let myself go for those 10 minutes with regularity, it starts to change then. And that feel or that kind of struggle just goes away.
Yeah, I like that because I remember my first teacher I studied with, he used to just say, a pose is a practice. Just practice one of the poses that we did, from class. And you don't need an hour and a half. You don't need all these things. You don't need special clothes. You don't,
Exactly.
it's so liberating as a beginner who didn't know anything about practicing. And so, in New York, when we have you come, we're going to have level 3 and up practitioners for the weekend. And so it will be people with experience. But I think a lot of the people who have experienced an interruption in their practice or like some disruption. Like now they have the neck thing and they're not doing Shirshasana, or now they have a hip thing. All these things happened in the pandemic. So that even though we're experienced, we have
problems.
Problems.
And I feel absolutely. And that's why, as I think Susan Elena would, you can agree or you can point out if that is not the case. I mean, that's what as I started having these students who have been practicing more than my age. So, and when you get these students, they have learned from the masters themselves. They have learned for so many years. They have been working for so many years. And so how and what to do with these students if they come to you? So that's where I've realized that it's not about just completing a sequence or just putting them through a sequence. Different phases of life, different stages of life with different conditions. We can just try to work around it and then finally learn to address what the asanas are finally supposed to do. And that's where those 10 minutes, are you able to just work on that disturbed mind or the distorted feeling which is there, that struggle, all that fight which is going on? You need not complicate it by placing a demand of, okay, I need an hour and a half practice and only then it identifies or it satisfies the criteria of doing a practice there. It's not needed. Means, yes, at times, as you said, a pose along with some focus on the breath, and if it allows you to feel you have calm down or you have focus for the rest of the day, you feel better prepared. That is the purpose of the practice, isn't it? Practice doesn't mean we're just going on and on with certain things. So that was liberating in a way to just get that pressure off ourselves or my own self over there. And then it encouraged me to just go on exploring something further, go on trying out, practicing, exploring whatever I'm struggling with, how I can try and find those intermediate steps at least, and not just be frustrated about not being able to do it. Fine, it's not happening. It's not happening. I don't need to be frustrated about it.
I think,
how can we work?
Yeah, and I think what I've really enjoyed observing in you and learning from you is that whole idea that as teachers and students, it's about this idea of communicating with ourselves, but also with our students. And I remember one day in one of the classes, it was a 2-hour class, and you gave us a 45-minute Shavasana, and everybody was like freaking out because you said, we did a few things and then you're like, okay, get a bolster, get this and that, and, get ready for Shavasana. Everybody's like, Uday, they're unmuting Uday, but you confused. The class is still another hour or something. But you could see that that's what was needed, that it didn't make sense to go anywhere but there. And that was an amazing experience at that time in the middle of the pandemic to do a 45-minute Shavasana. And so I think that now post-pandemic, and I think you've sort of carried some of that through.
Now it's a 2 hour Savasana we have to have.
I remember that. The people literally were unmuting, said, hey, it's not a 1 hour class,
That's
it's 2 hours class, so we still have.
And you're like, I know. You knew exactly what you were doing. Everybody thought you were confused about the time. But I think that's the sort of thing, isn't it? That what you're speaking to is being more aware as practitioners as well as teachers about what's appropriate, which is what always, you were saying all the time, right? Why are you here? Why are you doing this?
Exactly. And I feel in some ways, if we take away that like pressure or that excess expectation, it liberates and it allows us to practice with much more freedom. I'm again speaking from my experience of my field, that if I'm forcing myself, that it's literally like what is that pedometer or counting those steps. If you haven't completed your 10,000 or 15,000 steps, and then it's a disappointing feel always there. So yes, ideally, if possible, you should be walking, you should be doing all of those steps. You should be practicing for 1.5 hours, 2 hours, whatever you can. But if for some reason it's not happening or it just falls short of that goal, it should not create that dejection or disappointing feel. Then I feel it's a wrong approach, I think, in that case, because if it becomes almost like a necessity, then how different it is from an addiction, then, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's such an interesting study of the mind, of avoidance and, just procrastination and what and then, like you were talking earlier about having compassion and just being able to say, well, this is just where I'm at right now, or this is where that student's at right now. Like you're saying, I can't force someone. I had someone come in the other day and she had these little black, like footy socks on, and she just she really didn't want to take those socks off. And so I didn't say anything about her socks. I just started teaching all about the feet and really focusing on the feet, and look at your feet and spread your toes, see the space between your toes. How wide can you come down, bring your big toes together. And I mean, it went on and on. And I just kept thinking, when is she going to take off the socks? Because that was part of it, was just trying to, and eventually, and then I just kept teaching. I stopped focusing on it and I just kept teaching. And then I realized at some point, oh, she took the socks off. I don't know when, but instead of making it, like turning it into that ego, that ego, I think you were speaking to that,
Correct. Yeah. And I think that is a change I've noticed.
I guess it's like getting into a power struggle, whether that is that power struggle. Am I getting into it with a student for some reason, or am I getting into it with myself because I'm, disappointed in myself for some, and just giving that up, I think is what you're saying, which is so refreshing.
I think, and that's how it should be, isn't it? Otherwise, you're right. Like the word, I like what word you used. It becomes a power struggle, and we always have that upper hand as teachers. We would always be able to express and say, but then doesn't help. Means in this case, whether it's socks or the case of that lady who doesn't want to bend, we can be powerful with our words and we can say some things. But then what is that the reason behind it? The only thing with that lady is I never got to know why she had that reluctance to bend sideways. Because when I asked, she said, "No, I just didn't like it." So why the dislike came up, I'm not sure about it. But we like, who knows? Like, what are the reasons? Maybe some of them, like with the socks, I've noticed even here at times when it's cold, I realize like how cold it is. It's the cold is of a
People have a
different
different thing
kind.
about their feet. They don't want their feet touching things, or they have some fungus or something. They don't want to give it to other people, or something they don't want to catch it from other people. People have different things about feet. But I think it's important
Exactly.
that we're going to take them on a journey. And so we want them to be with us when you go on that journey. And so if you know it's going to be really great if you do this and they're not doing it, it feels like, oh, come on, I want to take you somewhere. And they go, oh, I don't, I'm not going to go sideways. And so then it feels like, well, then how can I take you there? Because there's these steps to get there. I want to take you to this really great place. And so that's what kind of, I don't think it's not always a power struggle in that way. It's like, I know where we're going. I want you to come with me. And then they're going, no, I don't do that. I don't. So then they think, oh,
Yeah.
so then you're not going to be able to enjoy what I'm going to show you. And you don't want to miss that chocolate shop that we're going to stop at. So and then we only get that chocolate shop if we do this other thing first. So that's what happens, Anyway.
True.